Hi, my name is Bill Stapleton. I'm the Deputy Principal at Seaview High School. This is an iPad information session for parents of any students in Years 7, 8 and 9 if you're wanting to know a little bit more about why we use iPads at Seaview and how to set them up and help perhaps help your young person who may have some issues with their screen time management, or if you're concerned about how they're using their iPad. So what I'll cover during this session is I'll talk about current data about Generation Alpha, which is our incoming Year 7s and 8s. Benefits of iPads for learning, common mistakes that parents make, and I'll certainly put myself in this category as a parent, how we set up our iPads, so how you can set them up to perhaps best support your young person at home. I'm going to talk about family sharing and screen time in particular. I'm going to talk about tech-savvy kids and the tricks that they use to try and get around some of the restrictions that we sometimes place, and covering again just briefly staying safe online. Slight disclaimer quickly, if you're not aware, if you haven't heard one of my sessions before, I am not a tech expert. I am also not sponsored by any company. So I am not sponsored by any of the companies that I will talk about later that I endorse in terms of their use for what they can do. This is purely from my opinions as a teacher with a passion for technology use in the classroom and a dad of 3 way too tech-savvy children for their own good. I have 3 boys, 10-year-old twins and a 7-year-old, and yeah, they are quite tech-savvy. So talking about your children, the Generation Alpha. So these are for any children who are born from 2010 onwards. So this is at the start of 2023, this video. So that's generally most of our Year 7s, some of our Year 8s. Obviously incoming Year 6s into Year 7 for 2024 will definitely fall into Generation Alpha. They're also known by a couple of other names though. They're known as Generation Glass. This is because pretty much majority of everything they've interacted with in their life has a glass screen in front of it, whether that's a TV, a phone screen, an iPad screen, a laptop screen, whatever. They're used to interacting and seeing everything through a glass screen. They're also known as the up ages. They are developing physiologically, but also psychologically and socially at a much faster rate than previous generations. So children who used to perhaps start developing physically at around 11 or 12 years of age are now developing earlier. They're getting taller, but they're also developing social skills at an earlier age as well. And so they're often called the up ages. They're acting above where their age would traditionally be. They're also called the multimodals. The multimodals refers to the fact that they're so used to getting information from a large variety of different sources, rather than just sort of 1 or 2 mediums. There's so many different ways that they interact and share their experiences these days. And they're also known as the global gen. They're connected on a far bigger scale to lots of different people around the world than any previous generations. Little infographic for you here. What you might be probably most interested in is some of this information here about the incoming technology. So today this session is obviously about iPads, okay? And these were introduced in 2010, which is right at the start of their generation. So basically, any child who has been born as a Generation Alpha will always have experienced an iPad. Right. You can see some of the other things that's coming through here. 3D printers have now been around for 10 years. Apple Watches, Fortnite, obviously a big gaming revolution that happened through there. AirPods have come in, 5G broadband and internet has now been around for 3 years. We've now got autonomous vehicles, we've got quantum computing. Next year they're talking about aerial ride sharing being an option, so not just Ubering anymore, but you can ride share around different places. But also some of the outgoing technology, which is some of the things that, it's probably, if you're some of the old generations, you still might consider as reasonably modern. But things like, CDs and DVDs are obviously gone. MP3 players are gone now. Desktop computers are on the way out now. Everything is pretty much becoming a laptop or mobile. Credit cards, we no longer now generally have credit cards with us. They often go as digitized. The wallets have gone. On my phone, I have everything. I have my driver's license, my credit cards. I have pretty much everything I need on my phone. I hate to think what would happen if I actually lose it, but that's a different story for another time. So this is the generation that is coming up now. And what can be daunting for us as parents is the fact that we are quite removed, I guess, from some of this new technology, but it's not necessarily something that's daunting for them. They are immersed in it. It is with them all the time. They just embrace it and accept it, and we can struggle to keep up. So what I want to talk about is why we actually use iPads at Seaview in the classroom. It's a very common question that we get from many parents of why we need them. Some consider it a distraction. Some consider it that it's detrimental to their child's learning. So I want to talk to you about some of the reasons why we have decided here at Seaview to use them. iPads bring excitement, engagement, and exploration to learning in the classroom through the use of apps, and that's primarily the function of an iPad. It is not a laptop replacement. It is not a word processor. It should not be something that students sit there and just type up huge amounts of information on. That is not what an iPad is for. They allow for much deeper exploration of concepts and ideas and promote creativity when it comes to showing a child's learning. Our world is a digital world, and students need to learn how to use technology safely and appropriately from a young age. So there's so many more opportunities now for them within the classroom to show how they have learned. They can be creative and do a movie or a infographic like we just saw before. They could do an interactive PowerPoint. They could do their own video presentation using iMovie. There's so many different options, which is quite different from, I guess, the main thing I went through school was you could do a poster, and that was probably the main way that most students showed their work. And they're also far more portable and easy to carry around than laptops. All right, they're also generally sturdier and a bit more shock resistant. I'm not sure if you're aware, but students in years 7, 8, and 9 don't always tend to necessarily look after things so well. So they do last a lot longer, and the battery does last a lot longer as well than just a laptop, which has to be often be charged during the day. Some data around why iPad use in the classroom is so good. So this is some recent data from a result from EdTech. They're a company that specialises in the use of technology in education. They found that kindergarten students who use iPads in the classroom scored higher on literacy levels. Year 5 students who used the Motion Math iPad game increased their test scores by 15% on average. 73% of high school students feel that using iPads improves the quality of their work. 69% of high school students said that getting to use iPads motivated them to do more work in class. And I'll be honest, as a teacher, one of the biggest things we struggle with, particularly with teenage boys, is motivation and engaging them in lessons. They don't want to necessarily be learning some of the history or the curriculum that we are trying to impart to them, whether it's maths, English, science, anything. Sometimes getting them engaged is quite hard. And so iPads allows us to hook them in and engage them in a way that we wouldn't normally be able to do. And even students who studied medicine, all right, so those students who went on into medicine and they're using iPads in an immersive way to help learn material scored 23% higher on national exams than those that did not use them. So they are a very, very useful tool, okay? They're not a replacement for learning in the classroom. They're just a tool to enhance the learning. So common mistakes that parents make, and again, I 100% put myself in this category with 3 young boys, is number 1, not setting limits on technology use. The longer that young people go without limits, the harder it is to get them back to a reasonable time. So if you are a parent who perhaps has given them their first phone or their first iPad and you basically haven't set any limits on how much screen time they can have, you're going to find that if you want to start imposing some limits on how much they can access their device during the day, there's going to be pushback and it's going to be hard and it's going to be difficult to get them back into a reasonable amount of time to begin with. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, but I'm just letting you know that it does make it hard. So number 1 mistake we make is not setting limits. Second mistake we commonly make is not planning family activities without technology. All right? You need to model that you can actually have fun and be entertained without the use of a screen. I'm sure if you have a young person, you have often heard them say, "I'm bored." Generally because they don't have a screen in front of them. They don't know how to entertain themselves without a screen. They haven't kind of learnt those skills to be able to go out and explore and engage and get real world hands-on learning without actually interacting with a screen. So you need to model that. I've got a picture here of Pass the Pigs. It's something we've introduced to my children and we've just tried to do like as a regular thing each night, just to entertain them and have some family time without the use of a screen. And the third most common mistake, and this is a very, very common one, is not staying up to date. I get how busy it is as a parent and how much we have demanding of our time at the moment, from work, getting home, sorting the kids out, and we just want to relax. And ironically, quite often we do it in front of a screen when they go to bed. But we need to stay up to date. It's unlikely that you're ever going to be ahead of your child when it comes to IT. Their brains just develop so quickly at a young age. They pick up things much faster than we do, and they just innately have this ability to use technology. So it's unlikely you're ever going to be ahead of them, but you can at least try and stay up with them or stay next to them as much as possible. If you have not yet joined up to National Online Safety, I strongly recommend that you do this. As Seaview parents, you can enroll for free and access all of their information. If you'd like some more information about that, please contact the school on 8377 8000. We are more than happy to help you out with that. But probably the most important tip I can give you is talk with your child about why you're doing what you're doing. And this has been a common theme through each of these presentations that I've been doing to help support our parents. Talk to them, all right? If you try and impose screen times or limitations on their access to their iPad, I can guarantee they'll have one of two conversations with you. They'll either say, why are you spying on me, right? Don't you trust me? Or they're going to say, you don't want me to have any fun. You're just trying to protect me and not let me do anything. Guarantee you will have one of those two responses from them. And what I say to all parents is to have the conversation around the fact that you are not doing this to try and limit their fun, but you are doing this to protect them from things that want to harm them. And I often talk about, it's the analogy of like sheep in a paddock. We put the fence around them, not necessarily to limit where the sheep can go, but to stop the bad things from coming in. Okay, and that's your job. You are the shepherd. You are the person who's looking out for those sheep, not to try and limit their fun, but to make sure they can have a long and healthy and happy lifestyle. So family sharing is something that is set up by Apple. Right? Family sharing lets you and up to 5 other family members share access to Apple services like Apple Music, Apple TV+, News+, and Apple Arcade. Your family can also share iTunes, Apple Books, and App Store purchases, an iCloud storage plan, and a family photo album. This is really, really useful, particularly if you do have multiple children. What you can do is you can purchase a particular game or app once as the parent, that you get charged for it, and then you can actually push that out and they can download it on their device as well, and you don't have to pay for it multiple times. So you can share some of those purchases, which is really quite useful and does save you a lot of money. You can also create shared family albums, as we said there, and share some of those experiences and those memories together. It's a good way to stay connected with your child. And also super, super helpful is you can also help locate each other's missing devices. So if they do leave their iPad somewhere, you can actually track it down. You can get it to play a sound. It's very, very useful. But it is also, you could also use it if you want to just kind of check their location. So it's like a incognito version, I guess, of location sharing as well, of being able to check how they're currently going. So it is very, very useful. If you want to know why you should use family sharing, and I reckon you should, it lets you share information. Locations and calendars are the big two. It makes sure your children cannot purchase apps or in-app content without parent approval. So if you set them up linked to your account, you can set purchase restrictions on their iPad, so they cannot download any apps, they cannot make any in-app purchases without your express permission, which is a very, very useful tool. And it allows you as parents to have more control over what online content your teen can access. You will need your own Apple device, all right, so an iPhone, an iPad, or a MacBook, plus an Apple ID to set up family sharing. So at this point, if you don't have an Apple device, you might be wondering, what do I do? All right. Well, it does make it harder to be able to put boundaries in place on the iPad for your son or daughter. However, my recommendations are one of two things. Okay. Either make sure you set up the iPad using your Apple ID. This at least gives you some control over purchases and app installation, but it's not ideal because that then links obviously to some of your other devices if you do end up having your Apple ID on other things, and it can just get a bit messy, so it's not necessarily ideal. What I would recommend that you do is purchase third-party software such as Bark. Bark is an app you can purchase and download onto the iPad, and you can link it to your Android device, which allows you to set up screen time control, monitor the iPad usage, etc. A lot of the things that you'll be able to do through screen time, which you'll set up on iPads in a minute. So that's my recommended option if you don't have your own Apple device. If you want to set up family sharing, please check out the Setting Up Family Sharing Help document, which will be made available on our website. Otherwise, you can go to this link through Apple to just set up family sharing as well. And I just want to say it's never too late to set it up. So even if your son or daughter has had their device for a while, you can still link them back into your family sharing account, and it's very, very beneficial. In terms of screen time allows you to get insights about your screen time and set limits for what you want to manage. It's an option built into all iPads or any Apple device, basically, or iPhone as well, and lets you know how much time your child spends on apps, what they're able to view on websites, and when they are not allowed to use the iPad, which is probably one of the real key things that I think you should explore with screen time. It works especially well if your son or daughter moves between parents as well, and you can kind of have some consistency between the two households. But very important, if you're going to go through and set up screen time, very important little side note for you is to firstly think about how much time they're spending is not as important as what they are doing when they're online. They could be spending 3 hours online just playing a game, which is reasonably harmless, apart from obviously the fact that it's a lot of screen time, versus they could be spending 10-15 minutes in a chat room and experience a lot of negative interactions. So it's always important to know what they're doing, not just how much time they're spending on it. And the one thing I will say about screen time on an iPad, it will tell you how much time they're doing. It will tell you what apps they're using at the time, but it will not tell you what they're doing on them and if there's anything inappropriate happening. So you need to keep that in mind. Why use your screen time? Well, primarily because screen time linked before bed has been linked with less sleep and higher body mass indexes in kids. And this also relates to adults as well. There's lots of information now about blue screen light and the impact it has on the brain and the ability to sleep. And so students who get less sleep concentrate less in the classroom, they've got less energy, they're less motivated to exercise, so it does link to increased obesity. So it has a lot of flow-on effect. All right, so if you're not going to use it for any other reason, I just recommend you set up the downtime on it, and I'll talk about that shortly in a minute. Make sure that they can't access the iPad when they should be sleeping. It also helps you to see, though, what they're using the iPad for, and it makes sure that they are safer while using the internet. Now, I say safer, not completely safe, because nothing is foolproof. So if you want to set up family sharing, again, we have our screen time function for iPads help, which again will be on our school website, or you can visit Apple for some more information. I'm not going to go through it now, but it's a pretty straightforward document of how you go through, set it up, and some recommendations. Again, this is purely based upon my experience as a parent, probably more in this time now, and I'm just trying to share that with you. Again, please do not hold me to anything in there. It is just, I'm just trying to put some resources together to help you out. Now, unfortunately, there are a lot of tech-savvy kids around, okay? Kids will Google, YouTube, or just ask their friends how to get around screen time. This is a video you can go watch later if you want, about a young boy who's worked out how to hack into iPads with a passcode just using Siri voice. So you can have a look at that later if you want. It's about 1:46, okay? Don't be surprised if they do it. All right, it's normal inquisitiveness for them to want to find out how to get around restrictions. They want to explore the world, they want to experience things, and they don't have the ability to think forward about potential consequences for what they do. So have a conversation with them before they try it. Let them know that yes, you know that you're aware that there's ways they can get around, they can try and get around it, but have the conversation around the fact that you trust them, you're doing this for their protection, and they need to trust you. But just for your information, these are some of the ways they do try to get around screen time usage or just lockdowns on the iPad. First thing they'll try and do is perhaps do a factory reset on the device. So if they've got the ability to be able to enter in some of the passcodes to allow a factory reset, that will remove all the restrictions that you've placed on the iPad itself. So if you see in the family sharing, if you see their regular screen time has just plateaued at 0, normally means they've probably reset the device, so you can have a check. Second one is about seeing the passcode. I've heard a story about from a parent that there was a child who handed over the passcode, handed over the device, and said, "Oh, can you unlock this for me?" And the parent worked out that they had got the parent to stand directly in front of a mirror, and the child, was looking at the passcode as it was entered in the mirror. Very, very tricky. They're very, very clever, but make sure you protect the passcode if you are setting that up for screen time sharing. So they'll probably have their own passcode for their device, but they look to actually try and look at the passcode when you're entering it for anything related to screen time. They use Siri to message, and that's a way of getting around restrictions that might have been placed in there. So perhaps consider disabling Siri on their iPad. They change the time zone. So if you set up that they can't use the iPad between 10 p.m. at night and 7 in the morning, reasonably tech-savvy kid, if they can, will go in and change the time zone so that they can keep accessing it beyond that time. They'll watch YouTube videos sent as links. So if you block YouTube, block access to YouTube, they can still look at it if it's sent as a link in a message from someone. They might use software to hack the 4-digit passcode. So make sure there's nothing on the iPad that's downloaded that you don't know what it is. If you set up purchase restrictions, obviously they can't get anything onto the iPad without your knowledge. So that's a really good way to stop them doing this. They can message from a picture. This is quite ingenious. So they actually take a screenshot of a picture with the messaging function on it, and then they can tap on that and they can get around the downtime and keep messaging after downtime using that picture. So it's quite ingenious hack. So just be aware that there is another way they can do it. They can delete and reload apps to bypass limits. So if you set say an hour on a particular game, for example, if they've got the ability to be able to just download themselves, they will delete the app, re-download it, and it resets the time limits because it treats it as a new app. And if they're really, really clever, they'll also try and add a new password or Touch ID to the iPad as well. So just be aware, again, these are some of the ways you know they can get around. Talk to them about the fact that you trust them, that you're doing this because you want to help them enjoy the iPad, but also be safe on it as well. So my final thoughts for you. Ultimately, if your child wants to get around the screen time limits on an iPad, they will. Okay, they will find a way to get around it. Nothing is foolproof. Okay, and I actually probably recommend that you don't go into full lockdown mode on the iPad because that can actually interfere with their ability to use it effectively in the classroom. If you're setting up your iPad, what I'd recommend you do is 100% set up downtime. So set it up so that they can't access the iPad between a certain time at night and a certain time in the morning, right? Just so that you can guarantee that they're not going to be out using it when they're in their bedroom, perhaps when they should be sleeping. Definitely set up family sharing so that you can monitor and control what they download to their iPad. Again, through school, you don't need to worry about getting requests for downloads at school because any app that we need them to use in the classroom will go into the self-service kiosk here at school, which is an app on their iPad, which we get them to install, and they'll be able to access that without the need for parental approval, okay? Because obviously they're all approved by the school. So that's something that's quite useful as well. So if you set up those two things on the iPad, you're already well ahead of the game. Remember, the what is more important than the how much. So make sure you have conversations with them about what they're actually using their iPad for. Have a look at the apps. Do a regular sort of mini inspection on their iPad. Just have a look at what they're using just to keep yourself informed and up to date. And keep your lines of communication with them open. Continue to talk to them. Make sure that they know that they can talk to you if there's anything they're unsure about or if they need help or support. That's really important. I often get asked on just what I would do as a parent. So again, this is just purely from my research. This is what I've decided to go with. Okay, my preference is for any mobile devices that my children have, iPads or mobile phones, I'm going to be using NetNanny. Now, this is just at the moment based upon their pricing and what they can offer. I think they're pretty good in terms of pricing, and they offer a lot of real-time monitoring. So any social media, screen time usage, you can block certain apps if you want them to not access certain things. Yeah, it's a very, very useful app that you control from your device. So that's what I'm going to be using for any mobile devices that my children have. And for when they're at home, I'm going to be using Circle Home Plus. So Circle Home Plus is just a device that you install at home, and it allows you a lot of control over the network and devices at home. So you can actually do a lot of screen time usage. You can block access to the internet for certain devices. So it's really, really useful for parents. If you don't want to have to be, one of those parents who just unplugs the Wi-Fi and then everyone loses out, you can actually block access to the Wi-Fi at certain times using Circle Home Plus, which again is quite useful. So this would be my recommendations and what I'm going to be putting in place to try and help support my children. If you are really concerned about what you're using an iPad for, do look at something. So third-party monitoring software, like I said, NetNanny, Bark is another really, really good one. Consider an electronic device contracts, whether a mobile phone contract or a social media contract. There's information on those in our parent booklet, again on our website, or a device to manage home internet access. Circle Home Plus is one. Griffin's another one that you can consider. Again, that information is just purely information we've tried to gather for you to cut down the amount of time you need to try researching. So have a look at the parent booklet on our website. We do have a couple of other sessions, so if you are a Seaview High School parent, you definitely want to be connected with DayMap, so you can scan this QR code or go to this YouTube address to help stay connected with the school. Or, probably more relevant to this session around iPads, is if you want to explore a little bit more about some of the dangers of social media and how to keep your child safe online, please visit this other session that I've done as well. So I want to thank you for this. Again, what I'll say is, it's very, very hard to stay ahead of your child in terms of their ability to use IT very well and get around what we try to do. So keep your lines of communication open with them, talk to them always, try and set up some boundaries in place to keep them safe, and hopefully they'll have a reasonably stress-free time, and so will you. Thanks for watching. All the best.